Hey everybody, this is Peyton with Gathering Hope. I'm one of the co-founders, and today I have Mallory Henderson with me. The name of her company is Mallory Morgan Co., and I'm just so glad she's here with us. I've been following her on Instagram and asked her if she wanted to share her story with our community. So welcome to we're calling this series Slaying the Stigma. And so we're talking about story over this next year. And so your story is the one that we want to hear today. So if you would share a little bit about who you are, your family, what you do, that kind of stuff. And then after that, I want to hear your story.
Yeah, so my name is Mallory, and I work with, well, first of all, I live in Amarillo, Texas. So we're out west. There are more cows than people here for sure.
Oh my gosh.
But I live here with my son, who's 3.5, and my husband, Sam. We have a husky Malamute who is awesome, and I don't ask me how we ended up with a husky Malamute, and he's the best ever. But anyways, like you mentioned, I run MalloryMorgan.co, which basically I mentor women in business, and I teach from a biblical perspective. So we hold like retreats a couple of times a year in Lake Tahoe, and we teach women how to make money basically on Instagram. But we do it, like I said, through a biblical lens. And so I love what I do. I'm on Instagram a lot. That's kind of my office. But yeah, I mean, that's what I do in a nutshell. And then I'm a mom for Judah. So it's a blessing and I love it. But as far as my story, do you want me to go ahead and just kind of?
Absolutely. First of all, thanks for sharing who you are and what you do. I'm signed up for your Instagram course that starts in January, so I'm really excited about that.
Oh, yay.
Yeah, I love the model of what you do. There are not many people who teach the stuff that we really need to know, but with a biblical perspective. So I cannot wait to dig into that. But yeah, share your story with us. We were talking before I pressed record that your story is kind of one of those in the middle, I think, stories. And I know it's going to resonate with a lot of women. So introduce us to your babies.
Yeah. So first, I love that you said I'm in the middle, because that has been like a theme, I feel like, of this year. Just the Lord like speaking over me, like literally those words, like you're in the middle.
Wow.
And I really do like it, as much as I'm going to be very candid and just honest with you in this. Like I hate being in the middle. It really stinks. It's really, really hard. I wish that I could see what the end of our story looks like.
Yeah.
But I would say that I am able to like know Jesus more than I've gotten to know Jesus more in the middle than I ever knew him, like at the end of other stories that I've lived. Like this is where I have gotten to know the heart of God. So
yeah.
Hopefully this is encouraging, because I am in the middle, and like you said, I don't have a nice bow to tie at the end of the story. We still are walking it, and we don't know what will happen, and we're just trusting that we serve a good God. And so my story, I'm 30 years old, so I got married when I was 22 to my college sweetheart, and about 3 years in, we started to try to have children, and we got pregnant really like right away. So
Okay.
I think growing up, I don't know if I'm the only one I just didn't know I knew miscarriage was a thing.
You're right.
You're right. A very distant thing. Like I didn't really ever think that was going to touch me,
Mm-hmm.
And I never really knew what infertility was. I didn't understand that it was hard for some women to get pregnant. And so we got pregnant right away. And that was just kind of what I thought that was how it would go. But about 12 weeks in, I just started, like, I felt like something was off. And so I called OB and my husband. It was actually the day before my husband's birthday. And so he was like on a business trip or something. He was out of town for some reason. And so I called my mom and asked if she would come to the appointment with me. And I know that a lot of women who have experienced loss, like they have a similar story of being in the room with the sonographer and all those things, and just kind of seeing it on their face, something was wrong. And I'll never forget that experience. Just being pregnant for the first time and looking at her and just knowing like, okay, something is really wrong. And she just looked at me and said, "I'm so sorry." And
Was this your first appointment going in or no?
we had already seen the heartbeat a couple of times. And so I think I was like, I tend to be just like a worrier in general. And so part of me was like, okay, I'm just like really overly worried about this. There's nothing really wrong. I really just wanted this appointment to like kind of ease my concern and tension. But when she looked at me and said, "I'm so sorry," that was like, okay, it's confirmed. Like we've lost this baby. And so it was a missed miscarriage. So
okay.
My baby stopped growing around 9 weeks, but my body wasn't resonating that. And so
Okay.
I wasn't eating or anything like that. And my body just wasn't letting go of the pregnancy. And so we ended up having a DNC, which was, pretty traumatic just in its own right, I think. But yeah, that was our first loss. And so about a year and a half later, my husband and I served overseas. So we led young adults. We were in South Africa for a while. We were in Jamaica and Haiti and Belize.
Wow.
We were all over. And I just yearned for a baby. Like we both did. And so I finally was like, okay, we've got to go home, and like I need to get healthy and focus on this. And that's what we did. And so we went home and we focused on just eating really well and all the things. I think for me, I was like, okay, I'm going to do everything right. I was so afraid of losing another baby. And so we did. And I don't think Judah was born and all those things because we did everything right. I think he was born because God is the giver of life. And he was really to our family. And so we got pregnant. It took us a while. It took us a few months. And we ended up having Judah. We had him around 38 weeks. So he was a little bit early, and he was a NICU baby for about 3 days. But overall, like it was a great experience. It really was. And so
I love his name.
He is healthy. Oh, I just love him. He's a nut. I have a picture here. Can I?
Absolutely.
This is Judah and his daddy.
Baby. So
yeah. And so I think here's the thing about our story is I think after that, I was like, okay, we're golden. Like that first thing, it was just a fluke. Like it was just our it was just a little fluke. And so after that, I was like, we're done, with pregnancy loss. That's not going to touch us again. And Sam and I were intentional after Judah was born. We really wanted time with him, and we didn't want to start trying again for a couple of years. And so we waited. And then we started trying again. We got pregnant right away, and we lost that baby at 8 weeks. And we ended up not having to have a DNC or anything like that. I was miscarry naturally. But we lost that baby at 8 weeks. And then we started trying almost immediately after that. And we lost that baby about 6 weeks. So that was a very early loss. All of my losses were fairly early. But since then, we have been trying, and it's been almost 24 months, and we've not seen one positive pregnancy test. So now we're in the throes of infertility, and we've experienced both. We've experienced the pregnancy loss recurrent, and now we're experiencing infertility. So that's kind of where we are in our journey.
I know that a lot of women who are watching have experienced both of those things, including the infertility piece after losing children. What has been the most surprising part of this journey for you?
Oh, man. I think one of the most surprising things is just how common it really is for women to lose their children. And like I said, I just didn't know. I didn't know. My mom had never gone through pregnancy loss. And so I just had never, it just wasn't spoken about. And that was one big thing whenever I did start experiencing this, is that I wanted to talk about it. I wanted it to be something that is more normalized, and
Right.
um, because it's so common, and the rules that we've put in place, our culture has put in place around pregnancy, and how things should be, and when you should honor a life and when you just shouldn't talk about it, all of
Yes.
those I think are really toxic. And so I think that is one of the most surprising things, is just how common it is and how hard it is to work around the stigma. And yeah, I think that would be, for me, what has shocked me the most.
So when you, with your first pregnancy, did you share that you had experienced a miscarriage? Did you share each time with your family and your community that had happened?
Yes, yeah. Before I even really knew, like I said, about pregnancy loss, I always wanted to share just as soon as we found out, because to me, it's a life is a life, and
Yes.
so we did that with my family. Like, we let them know, and all of that. And I am on Instagram. I don't have a massive following, but I have a community there of
Yeah.
people that share in life with, and so yeah, we always shared right away, like fairly right after we found out we were pregnant, and then we always shared when we lost the child. So
Yeah. Did you find that when you did share, you had people that kind of came out of the woodwork, like you never knew that about them?
oh, totally. I mean, like crazy. Like,
What were some
and
of the things that they shared with you?
I mean, just honestly, like women who had experienced loss, who hadn't gotten to the 12-week mark,
Right.
women who had miscarried, who hadn't felt like they could ever even talk about their baby because they didn't make it 12 weeks. So their baby like really just wasn't honored in any way. And
Yeah.
a lot of women just saying, like, I didn't feel like my pain was valid. Like,
Yes.
I didn't feel like I was able to mourn that life because technically it wasn't even worth announcing. Um, I heard a lot of that, and I hear a lot of that.
It's so incredibly painful to hear and to speak those words. Um, what would you tell a mom? So you met, you kind of found out different people in your life. Were they people that you had like known for a long time? That was the case for me. That like, I'm like, I literally never knew this about you. I mean, we've known each other a long time.
Some people
Yeah.
on Instagram, that's less so. But I mean,
Right.
yeah, family members that I've known my whole life, have said we went through this. And I think too, culturally, like, 10-20 years ago, it was just
Yes.
something you just didn't talk about.
Didn't talk about. Yeah. I don't even know. I can't pinpoint like where that came from.
I don't know.
Um, I'm on the hunt for that information. Like, how did we get to the point where um, different weeks mean different value? And
Right.
or we don't talk about it, or we just move on from it, or we're supposed to move on from it. Um, I still haven't come to the conclusion of how we got to this point. Um, but my next question for you is, what would you tell a mom who's new to this journey? So those women who were sharing with you, this happened to me too. What would you say to them?
Yeah, so I love this question so much. So I have a dear friend, Jordan. You've probably heard of her. She's amazing. Her name is Jordan Lee Dooley.
Okay.
Um, we became friends because, and she would not mind me talking about this. She lost two babies this year in
Oh
2020,
wow.
and she's kind of in the same sphere of just influence. And she does business, Instagram, all of those things. And so
Okay.
we became friends through our losses. And this question, like, I sent her a message after her very first loss. And when you asked me this question, I went back and read that message just because I remember thinking, like, what would I say to someone? Like, what have I said?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna read. If it's okay, I'm gonna read you
Please do.
like,
I would love to hear that.
And this is like, it's all kind of cut up. I copied and pasted it here, but the first thing that I would tell her is that she is a mother. I think one of the very first things for me, I remember walking through our first miscarriage and then the first Mother's Day coming up, and feeling in my heart that I was a mom, and that my baby, we call them our glory babies, that my glory baby, yeah, was in heaven. But I wanted to be like able to celebrate my baby's life, and I wanted to be recognized as a mom. And
yes,
you know, it's just tough. My own mom had never walked through miscarriage, and so for her it was very hard for her to see like, oh, you are a mother, you know.
right.
I wanted to be validated in that. And so I think the very first thing is that I would say, like, if you are a woman who has not had a live birth yet, you don't have a baby earthside to hold and squeeze, it does not mean that you're not a mother. You are a mother the second that life is conceived inside of you, or the adoption papers, you know, go through. Right. Whatever that looks like on this side of heaven, I just think it's so important for women to know and to understand and to stand in that truth, like wholeheartedly. You are a mom.
Hands down, correct. We that is a huge value for us, is making sure that women know that they're a mother. It's such a special title, and there's so many women who are just silently mothers, and we want them to be able to fully be open about the fact to openly speak about their motherhood, even though it looks different.
Yes, 100%. And it's so easy just to lose that. And again, our culture does a good job of preaching a certain narrative, you know.
Yes.
And the reality is that you're a mom. And so I want women to be able to sit in that and know that.
Yeah.
The other thing is that your child's life matters. And that is hard to fathom or understand, you know, when this baby that you never got to meet, or maybe you did for briefly, or whatever that looked like, you know. And I think that it's so easy to just think, well, my baby's life didn't even matter. Nobody even got to meet them. Nobody knew them. But the reality is that God himself created that life.
Yeah.
And that life it's so valid and so precious to God. And I think it's just important to remember, like, whether or not anybody knows about your miscarriage or your loss or whatever, God knows. He knew about that life before it was even put into being. And he knows that child's name, and it's valid in his sight. And so I think that is another thing that is so important. But this is the rest of the message that I said. I would tell her to grieve and mourn and honor her loss, and then to look up and see no one but Jesus only. I think for me, it's been very difficult, I think, because our story is it's ongoing. I will be the first to say, thank you, Jesus, for giving us Judah. I think that has been obviously, like, it has helped the process, just to have him here and to be able to hold him and hug him and squeeze him. But a lot of the time I've had to look at myself and look in the mirror and be like, okay, these are valid losses. This is a real reason to mourn. These are things that you need to confront. I think that sometimes women won't. They'll just kind of sit there with their feelings and feel, again, like it's not a valid loss. It's such a unique loss because it's not the same. You know, it's not the same as losing someone here for 50 years that you've known your whole life or whatever. It's just different.
Yeah.
But my advice, like, to myself often is give yourself the space to mourn, give yourself the space to grieve, seek counsel from godly women who have gone before you, seek counsel from someone who has walked this same road, but don't camp there forever. Don't claim this for your life, that you are a barren woman, or that you are breeding death, or whatever these lies that I believe the enemy wants us to believe. I think we can kind of own those and just sit with them And I think the best way to kind of move forward for me has been like, okay, like I know my God. I know that he goes before me. I know that he is the giver of life and that he wants to give us good things.
Yeah.
He loves me deeply. And I know that whatever we walk through, he will bring us through. I also know that this is not eternity and
Right.
that there is death here and that is part of this whole narrative. and that really stinks. But he is good and he will see us through, and he has seen us through. And so just that piece of advice of yes, mourn, but also continue to walk in the power of Christ, because that is the power that you get to walk in as his daughter.
Yeah.
Knowing who the victor really is at the end. And whether or not I end up with 4 more babies that are biological, or we adopt 4 babies, or we don't end up with any more babies at all, I know my truth of who Christ is and who I am and who my family is because of who Christ is. And so, yeah, that's a lot of advice, but that was what
we need it. I love that you said to not camp there.
Yeah.
I think there's a difference in remembering and honoring that life, and then just making a choice to sit in that deep pit forever and ever. To say that you need to move out of that pit quickly or at a different pace than someone else, I don't find any validity in that at all. But also to just lift your head and see what is one small thing that I can cling to today. And asking God to provide that, I think so often that we can kind of get addicted to that pit and just want to make our home there. And I mean, to be perfectly honest, I take vacations there, still I've got to, if I don't take that time to mourn and remember and to try and circumnavigate that's not healthy either. But I just really appreciate how you said that. I love that. Where have you seen hope? What has helped you in this journey?
Oh man. Well, I see hope in the eyes of my child daily. Just knowing that is what God can do that, he can give us healthy babies. And that has been huge for me. But at the fear of sounding like this is such a Sunday school answer, biblical truth is where I have found the most hope, just because if I were to place my hope in, what I always thought that my motherhood journey would look like, I would be in despair today. I would be in total despair. And so there are books like, Pain and Suffering by Tim Keller. I'm reading through, it's called Piercing Heaven. And it's just a big book of prayers for Puritan believers.
Okay.
It's amazing. And I'm trying to think of some other books that I've read that have been, hold on, I have a whole list that have been so encouraging to me. Let's see if I can find any. Grief Observed by C.S.
Oh, that's a good one. I have read that one. That's such a brutally honest book, but it's one of those books that you're like, oh, thank God someone else thinks the same way.
So books, I think, written by authors who I know are biblically sound,
Right.
have been huge for me. I also, you say, earlier, you said, sometimes I take a vacation there, in that place of mourning. And I like that. I like that because there are times when I can just kind of feel it rising in me, my grief and my yearning for another child. And Another thing that we don't talk about a ton is just being, I mentioned I'm 30 years old, and,
Right.
we started trying for a family when I was 24. So
Okay.
we've been in this for 6 years. And all the while, life is going on around us with all of my friends who are having multiple babies and who have now completed their families. And we don't talk a lot about how, like, when you're trying for your family, most of the time, all your friends are also trying for their families and having
Right.
babies. And you're in that season of life where you're being invited to baby showers. And for a long time, I was a photographer. And so I would literally
Okay.
photograph my friends' births, and all the while be struggling, with my own journey.
Wow.
Yeah,
What was that like for you? Can we just take an aside there?
yeah, tough, but also beautiful.
Yeah.
I think there's nothing more beautiful than being in the room with, some of my best friends who have had children, and children naturally to amp it up a little bit. So just just in the most raw experience of a person's life, and to see new life being brought into the
Yeah.
world, that brought me hope. Did I have to struggle with, flesh-like feelings of jealousy? Yeah, I did, for
Yeah.
sure. I would, if I said that I didn't, but I think the hope trumped the jealousy in those situations, and just being able to remember what it was like, to be in a
Right.
hospital room, to hold your baby and all those things was really valuable for me. But one thing that I will do whenever I do feel like, okay, it's like I can feel this and I need to acknowledge it, I can't just ignore it. I will super late at night, something that has helped me. This might be silly, but when Judah is asleep and Sam is asleep, I'll just come into the living room and I'll put some earbuds in and turn on certain songs that have just truly resonated with me. And I'll just worship, and I will ugly cry, and I will just let it out, and spend that time in fellowship with God. And that is healing for me. That's super
Yeah.
healing for me. So things like that, just things like that, setting boundaries for myself. I have dear friends who are like my best friends, that, sometimes I'll help throw a baby shower, but sometimes I'll say, like, this season right now, I don't need to be in that. And I will give myself grace, and I'll have conversations that I need to have with my friends and say, look, I love you. I am celebrating this life for you.
Yeah.
But right now, I've got to protect my heart and this space and draw a boundary. And I'm probably not going to be able to come to this shower, or whatever that looks like. And I love from a distance instead of putting myself right in the middle of the room. And I
Yeah.
think that, so
It
things like
is
that.
okay. I wish I had had that clarity early on not even necessarily just early on, like even still. I mean, my son would be 6 now, and I still struggle with going to baby showers. And um, what has that been like for your friendships? What is the response to that?
I think more than anything, it's just about, just love. I think, and that's what happens when I feel like when you find the right friends that,
Yeah.
love and want the best for you and all those things. I think the piece that can be missing is the communication. And I think just communicating with your friends and saying, this has nothing to do with, I truly believe you can celebrate with your friend, but also be in deep sadness for yourself. And just figuring that out is tough. But communicating, I think, is a huge piece, and just calling before the shower happens instead of just not
Right.
showing up. And things like that, honoring the fact that you are their friend, and
Yes.
you want and honor them as well. And so just being kind to one another in that, I think, has been really helpful. But I feel like it's been,
Communication, that's not something that we're well versed in, are we?
not at all. I
Uh,
hate the phone. I do not like picking my phone up and actually calling people, but it goes a long way. It
it
really does.
sure, it really does. There's something about using our voices instead of sending a text that really, it solves so many problems that we have with this like online virtual world that we're so used to doing. There's inflections in our voices that really can just change the dynamic of a conversation.
Completely, yes.
Yeah.
There are text messages that I've read that I'm like, does she mean this or this or this or this?
Right.
Just be aware whenever you're communicating, I think is good.
Yes. Any other resources that you want to share with our community?
Oh goodness. Risen Motherhood, they do speak directly. There are some episodes that they speak directly to loss and miscarriage, but they're just, again, to reiterate my point, you are a mother, you are a mother, you are a mother. And that is just a really beautiful biblical source for all sorts of things, but they do address loss, and that has been huge for me. I mentioned did I mention counseling? I have gone to a counselor.
We had just talked about it, just like one word. Talk about counseling.
Counseling, I am such an advocate of. I think everyone and their dog should be in counseling, whether things are going great or horribly. I think it's very wise just to seek counsel in general. And maybe it doesn't have to look like, you going to an actual office. Maybe you know someone who is wise and older than you and has gone through things that you have not yet. And they're willing to sit with you over coffee for an hour and just listen to you. I know that looks different right now with COVID, all those things, but just kind of redefining that and figuring out what that looks like for you. For me, it looked like for a long time going weekly and sacrificing like financially, because I know that counseling is not cheap. And that for a long time held me back. I just was like, I can't justify spending $400 a month on going to counseling. But I will tell you what, it is the best thing. I think it is the best thing I've done for myself, for my family, for my relationship with my body. That's something that also is not talked about a lot. When you literally experience, for the lack of a better term, like death passing through you. I mean, that is what miscarrying feels like and is. It creates a very complicated relationship with your body. It can.
Right.
And for us, not being able to actually get pregnant now, I will openly say, like, there are things I have to work through with that. You're taught life, like you're a woman, this is what you're made to do, and then your body isn't doing it the way that you thought it was made to do something, and that can become very complicated. And so I think just going to a counselor and being able to talk through that has been massively beneficial for me.
It feels like such a betrayal of, I don't know if it has felt like that for you, but it felt that way for me. That was the word that I keep coming back to, is that such a betrayal of the body that I still live in, and how it just betrayed everything that I needed it to do. And working through that and counseling is definitely such a wise decision. And definitely, I totally hear you on the, I felt like I was making like a second mortgage payment in counseling. But I wouldn't be the person I am today without it. I just, there's no way I would be a functioning person without counseling.
It's such an impossible thing to internalize. I mean, it's not something that you're meant to internalize or to do alone. And so that's like, I mean, yes, it's expensive. Save where you can and make it a priority, because you are worth it. Like, your family is worth it. The things that you will be able to kind of uncover and heal from in counseling are worth it on 100%. I wish I had gone sooner, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think a lot of people who have been through counseling would say they wish they had started sooner. I wish I had started like it well before I even had children. I wish that I had had that, like, okay, so this is just what you do, right? And so now that this traumatic thing has happened, I already have an established relationship with someone. I really wish that it hadn't been this that drove me into counseling. I wish it had just been something that I had just done for myself and for my marriage and all of that stuff. So,
And
yeah.
you don't hear about people doing that, just like going to the gym, like it should.
Right.
Because when the hard thing happens, like in this world, you will have trouble. It's not like you might have trouble.
Yes.
It get a little bit difficult, like you will. So building that foundation of like figuring out how to work through that really hard stuff, I feel like is like the best gift to yourself ever. And
Yes.
it will save you many years of turmoil. So counseling.
Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. Before we wrap up, I just would love for you to share, if you're comfortable, kind of where things are at right now. I know that I've seen you sharing like your health journey and kind of what you're choosing for this present time. Would you be okay with sharing some of that with us?
Totally. Yeah. So it's hard whenever you're going through this. Let me preface it with saying I believe that God works in so many different ways. And I think that I don't know enough about the fertility realm and all the technology and all of those things. I know women who have had healthy babies through IVF, and I am so grateful that they have, because they're my nephew, or like,
Right.
I think God works in that way, in massive ways. But for us, I think that after just kind of, so recently we went to see a reproductive endocrinologist. We've seen a couple, and this one in particular was able to give us a diagnosis, which
Okay.
is not something we had had. I had been told that I had multiple genes of the MTHFR mutation.
Okay.
Things like that were here and there, like, okay, maybe this is a piece of the recurrent miscarriage puzzle,
Right.
but we're not really sure why you're not conceiving now. And this doctor was able to tell me, you have diminished ovarian reserve, which is not something that you want to hear when you're 30 years old.
No.
And basically, said like, it looks like your body is trying to go into menopause and your egg reserve is very low and all these things. And basically told us, if you want to have another child, your best bet, and this is like still kind of a gamble, would be IVF. And so that was the diagnosis that we got. And at first, I'm a doer, and so I'm like, okay, you give me the problem, and now we're going to figure out the solution, and we're going to do what we need to do.
Yes.
And left that office, and I'm also a researcher, and so I just researched my little hiney off, and
Yeah.
just like, oh gosh, like,
Do you know your Enneagram numbers?
4 wing 3.
Okay.
So I have wing 3 there that propels me forward.
Yes.
But yeah, so I researched a ton, and I just exhausted myself. Like,
Yeah.
all the research, if you get super in depth and you read the statistics and you start to measure your hope based on scientific evidence and what doctors, say about what God can do. And that is how I felt. I just got to this point where I was like, you know what? I just need to be still with the Holy Spirit and just ask, like, what do you want? Because I think that I know that a lot of the time, especially for myself, I can speak for myself, I can't speak for other women, but growing up, I had always wanted to be a mom, and that was just kind of an innate desire inside of me, and something that I assumed would come very easily to me. And I can honestly tell you that I have not, until now, one time sat before God and just said, what do you want our family to look like?
Mm-hmm.
What do you want for this family? Is it multiple kids? Is it not? Is it
right?
What? Because I think when you get to that point where you're like, okay, well, we don't have insurance that covers IVF. And so for us, that would look like literally almost 20 grand a cycle to do this maybe baby thing.
Right. Right.
And I just, the deeper I got into the research and all of that, I just realized like I have not sat before God and just genuinely asked him what he wants for our family one time. This has just been a labor of like my desire and us trying and just thinking that's what you do. But what if we said like, okay, Lord, like we have a picture hanging in our living room that says this family is set apart for his glory. And I truly believe that as followers of Christ, like we're set apart for his glory. And yes, he works things for good. But what is his story that he wants to tell through our family? And I felt very, very clear about the fact that we shouldn't pursue IVF or fertility treatment in any capacity.
Okay.
What we were going to do is just, we're going to do the things that we can do, that we can control, and continue to put our resources towards what we feel like they should go towards, giving and things like that. And we're sitting here open-handed and asking the Lord just to grow our family in the way that he wants to, in the way that he sees fit. He's done it before. He could give us another child if that is truly his will. And so we're just clinging to that. I think I had just kind of been on that treadmill for so long of like, okay, we're trying. And
right.
I hate to be this person, but like what that does to your personal, relationship with yourself, but also like your sex life and your marriage and all of those things, you have to consider the toll that it takes. And so for me, it was
stressors in one relationship. Yeah.
Tough. And yeah, I just felt kind of a call to say like, hey, we're going to let God do what he wants to do, and we're trusting that he will in his time. So that's kind of where we're at. We're just kind of in a place of rest and trust. And I'm so grateful. It has not been this peaceful in my home in a very long time.
I was about to say, do you feel a little bit like a little lighter having just
100,000% yes.
Yeah.
I feel, do I still yearn for another child? Yes. And I think especially around the holidays, it gets harder. You could probably relate to that.
Yes.
For whatever reason, it just stirs in you what life could look like,
Yes.
But it has been a gift, and not only to me, but I think to our son, for him to have his parents fully present in his life and not focus so much on creating another has been, I think, good for everybody.
Wow. Thank you for sharing all of that with us. I really appreciate it. I would love for you to also share how people can connect with you further if they want to touch base with you after hearing this.
Yes, I'm on Instagram at MalloryMorgan.co. And then I am the founder of the CELA Summit, which we're about to launch a company that's
looks so amazing.
Yes, it is awesome. But we're about to launch workwell.co, which is basically a ton of resources for women who are in business online.
Okay.
So that is where you can find us. I also have a website, MalloryMorgan.co. You can go there.
Cool.
You can always email me at hello@MalloryMorgan.co. I'm more than happy to talk to anybody who just needs somebody to talk to and is going through this, because I know how hard it is. So I would love to be a listening ear.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mallory. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
We'll see you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.